The alien tyrants howled with laughter as the human diplomat proposed fair terms, mocking our strength and resolve, certain they had the upper hand. But we would soon wipe those smug grins from their scaly faces forever when we called upon the true might of humanity for aid. Nathan gripped his data pad tight as the Daxamite negotiators heaped scorn upon him and the entire human race. Korvac, his old friend, sat silent and stone-faced. Bonds forged in the optimistic light of youth could crumble quickly under the weight of centuries of distrust and animosity. The Daxamites' dismissive words rang in Nathan's ears as they presented altered terms skewed completely in their favor, backed up by threats of military might that could crush humanity's fledgling colonies. Nathan's heart hammered in his chest as this deal was crucial for humanity's survival and expansion beyond Earth. Generations had toiled and sacrificed to reach for the stars, and failure now would render it all for naught. As despair crept in, his community beeped a message that made his blood run cold and then seared it with white-hot resolve and purpose. He stood, a conduit of icy calm, even as the galaxy teetered on the brink of open war. It was time to show these sneering alien despots what humanity was truly made of in the face of annihilation. The Murloc fleet stretched out across the void in an endless array of warships bristling with enough firepower to scorch 100 worlds. Warlord Kra stood on the bridge of his flagship, his yellow eyes gleaming with malice as he surveyed the armada. Thousands of ships, crewed by millions of Murloc warriors, were all united in their thirst for conquest and enslavement. For decades, the human colonies on the fringes of Murloc space had been a thorn in Kra's side. He had watched them grow and prosper, biding his time until the moment was right to strike, and now, with the rest of the galaxy distracted by petty squabbles and border disputes, that moment had finally arrived. All ships, commence the attack, Kra hissed, his forked tongue flicking out between his fangs. Burn their colonies to ash and bring me their survivors in chains. The Murloc fleet surged forward, a tidal wave of destruction descending upon the human colonies. The colonists fought back with everything they had, their defense platforms and warships unleashing volleys of missiles and energy beams. It was like trying to hold back the tide with a broom. The Murloc ships, their hulls bristling with advanced weaponry, tore through the human defenses like they were made of paper. Colony after colony fell, their inhabitants rounded up and herded onto Murloc slave ships. Those who resisted were cut down without mercy, their bodies left to drift in the cold emptiness of space. Daxamite betrayal light years away on the Daxamite homeworld, Nathan paced back and forth in the negotiation chamber, his face drawn and haggard. The news from the colonies was grim. The human military, already stretched thin, was unable to mount an effective counterattack against the Murlocs. "Korvac, please," Nathan said, turning to his old friend. "We need the Daxamites' help. The Murlocs will not stop at the colonies, they will come for Earth, for all of us." Korvac shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his loyalty to his people warring with his friendship with Nathan. I do not know if I can convince the Council to intervene. They believe this is a human problem." "A human problem?" Nathan's voice rose in anger. "The Murlocs are a threat to the entire galaxy. How can you sit back and do nothing?" Zorton, the Daxamite High Counselor, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "The humans have always been a thorn in our side," he sneered. "Perhaps it is time for you to learn your place. The Murlocs may even do us a favor by weakening your position in the galactic community." Nathan's fists clenched at his sides, his anger boiling over. "How dare you," he growled. "Humanity has always been there for the Daxamites, for all the species of the galaxy. We have fought and bled and died for the greater good, and this is how you repay us, with cowardice and betrayal." Zorton and the other Daxamite officials remained unmoved, their faces impassive. Nathan realized he was wasting his breath. The Daxamites would not be swayed by appeals to honor or friendship. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. There was only one option left, a desperate gamble that could either save humanity or doom them all. He reached for his communicator, his fingers trembling slightly as he keyed in the code for a secure channel. "This is Ambassador Nathan," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. "I am requesting permission to initiate Protocol Omega. I repeat, requesting permission to initiate Protocol Omega." The authorization for Protocol Omega came through. Nathan's hands shook as he typed out the coded transmission to Valhalla Base, his heart racing, hoping against hope that this secret weapon, this ace up humanity's sleeve, would be enough to stop the Murlocs. the secret weapon deep in uncharted space, klaxons blared throughout the hidden outpost of Valhalla. Admiral Bjorn Eriksson stormed onto the command deck, his eyes blazing with purpose. Status report, he barked. Sir, we've received the Omega signal from Ambassador Nathan. The Murlocs have attacked in force. The colonies are on the brink. Bjorn clenched his fists. The day they had trained for, the horrible eventuality that had driven their work here, had finally come. Mobilize the fleet. It's time to show the galaxy what Odin's hammer can do. In the hangars, thousands of human warriors rushed to their ships. These men and women, the best Earth had to offer, had been enhanced to the peak of physical and mental ability. They moved with fluid precision born of countless drills as they readied for war. The ships themselves were technological marvels, sleek and deadly, their hulls shimmering with advanced energy shielding. Mighty antimatter cannons bristled along their flanks, possessing enough firepower to reduce a small moon to slag. At the heart of each vessel, quantum-entangled communicators would allow them to coordinate instantly across the vastness of space. Bjorn watched with grim satisfaction as the Odin's Hammer fleet powered up and launched, tearing open rifts into the churning chaos of null space. He opened a channel to Nathan, his face set like granite. Ambassador, the fleet is en route. We'll hit those Murloc bastards like the fist of an angry god. I only pray we're not too late. Nathan sagged with relief, even as fresh trepidation churned in his gut. Protocol Omega was never meant to see the light of day. That humanity had devoted centuries of clandestine toil and countless resources to its development spoke to the severity of the threat. He glanced over to where the Daxamite delegation watched him with suspicious eyes. They could never know. The Daxamites, for all their bluster, were too prone to information leaks. If word got out about Valhalla and Odin's hammer prematurely, it could spell disaster. The Battle of New Carthage above New Carthage, the skies burned. Warlord Karay, his scales flushed with the thrill of impending victory, savored the sight of the human defenses crumbling before his onslaught. The Murloc fleet had the settlement completely encircled now, a noose of ships that pounded the surface with endless salvos of plasma fire and kinetic rounds. On the ground, the last pockets of human resistance fell back to their final redoubts. They fought with the desperate courage of those who knew death was inevitable, but they were only delaying the end. Kra drummed his claws against the command console, eager to oversee the final destruction of this human stronghold personally. A flash of light brighter than the sun tore open the heavens. Kare flinched, shielding his eyes as a gargantuan null space rupture yawned wide. From its swirling depths emerged a sight that shook the Murloc warlord to his very core. Ships, dozens of them, bearing the defiant sigil of Earth. But these were not the beleaguered, outclassed vessels Kare had been swatting aside with impunity. These ships were different, radiating a sense of coiled power and deadly purpose. Impossible, Kare hissed. All ships, target those new arrivals. Wipe them from the stars. The Murloc fleet wheeled ponderously to face the oncoming human warships, weapons powered up, thirsty for the kill. But before they could bring their guns to bear, the Odin's hammer struck. Searing lances of pure antimatter leapt from the human ships, so bright they seared Krae's retinas even through the polarized viewscreen. Murloc ships came apart like cheap toys, sliced open from stem to stern, their crews atomized before they could even scream. The Murloc fleet reeled, caught flat-footed by the sheer power of the human weapons. Kra howled in rage, spittle flying from his fangs as he watched his grand armada disintegrate before his eyes. This could not be happening. The humans were prey, cattle to be enslaved and culled. How could they wield such devastating technology? The battle raged, the very fabric of space-time shuddering under the ferocious exchange of fire. The Murlocs fought back, a wounded beast still deadly in its fury. But the humans matched them blow for blow. Odin's hammer tore through the enemy ranks, their shields shrugging off the fiercest attacks, their weapons dealing death with ruthless efficiency. Yet, for all their might, the humans were not invincible. One by one, even their advanced ships fell, overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the Murloc fleet. The battle hung in the balance, both sides hemorrhaging vessels and lives at a staggering rate. The fate of New Carthage, and perhaps all of humanity, would be decided in the next few desperate minutes. The space above New Carthage blazed with the fury of 1,000 suns as the Odin's hammer fleet clashed with the Murloc armada. Antimatter cannons flared, piercing the void with lances of blinding light. Shields flared and popped like soap bubbles as the relentless barrage tore ships asunder. The very fabric of space seemed to groan under the strain of the titanic energies being unleashed. Amid this maelstrom of destruction, a new force emerged. A phalanx of Daxamite warships, their hulls gleaming with the sheen of polished steel, dropped out of null space on the edge of the battle. At their head was the Daxamite flagship, an enormous dreadnought bristling with weapons. On the bridge of the flagship, Zorton stood tall, his eyes glinting with cold calculation as he surveyed the unfolding carnage. A cruel smile played across his thin lips. Everything was going according to plan. Light years away, in the heart of the Daxamite capital, Nathan stared at the holographic display in horror as the new fleet joined the fray. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of this sudden betrayal. He whirled on Korvac, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. "What the hell is going on, Korvac?" Nathan demanded, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Why are your people attacking us?" Korvac couldn't meet Nathan's gaze. He looked down, shame and guilt etched into every line of his face. "Zorton, he's been working with the Murlocs all along. He sees this as a chance to weaken both Earth and the Murlocs, leaving the Daxamites as the dominant power in the region." Nathan slammed his fist against the wall, his knuckles splitting with the force of the blow. "And you knew about this? You let this happen?" "No." Korvac's head snapped up, his eyes pleading. "I swear I had no idea until now." Zorton kept his plans hidden, even from me. The turning tide back at New Carthage, Admiral Erickson gritted his teeth as he watched the Daxamite ships engage his fleet. The Odin's hammer was now caught between two deadly forces, the Murlocs pressing in from one side and the Daxamites from the other. All ships, split formation. Erickson barked into the comm. "Alpha Wing, engage the Daxamites. Beta and Gamma, keep the pressure on those Murloc bastards." The human fleet divided, the sleek warships peeling off to face their new adversaries. But even with their advanced technology, they were hard-pressed to hold the line against the combined might of the Murlocs and Daxamites. One by one, the human ships winked out of existence, consumed by the ravening energies of the battle. In the Daxamite capital, Nathan was desperate. He knew that if the Daxamites were allowed to aid the Murlocs, all would be lost. He turned to Korvac, his eyes pleading. "Korvac, please, you have to stop this. Talk to Zorton, make him see reason." Korvac was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision bearing down on him like a physical force. Finally, he looked up, his jaw set with determination. "No, I'll do more than talk." With a speed that belied his age, Korvac spun on his heel and marched out of the room, his hand already reaching for his communicator. Nathan watched him go, a flicker of hope kindling in his chest. Aboard the Daxamite flagship, chaos erupted. Korvac's face appeared on every view screen, his voice booming through the comm channels. "Soldiers of Daxam, this is General Korvac. Zorton has betrayed us all. He has allied himself with the Murlocs, the very enemies we swore to protect the galaxy against. This cannot stand." All across the Daxamite fleet, soldiers and officers alike paused, listening to Korvac's impassioned plea. Many nodded, their faces grim with resolve. "I ask you now, not as your superior, but as your brother in arms. Stand with me. Stand against this treachery. For Daxam, and for the honor we hold dear." A cheer went up from the loyal Daxamite ships, even as Zorton sputtered with rage on the bridge of the flagship. "Korvac, you fool, you'll doom us all." But it was too late. The Daxamite fleet turned on itself, loyal ships engaging those still following Zorton's commands. The space around New Carthage became a swirling maelstrom of friend and foe, with the Odin's hammer caught in the middle. Admiral Erickson saw his chance. With the Daxamites in disarray, he could focus the full might of his fleet against the Murlocs. He barked his orders, and the human ships surged forward, their antimatter cannons blazing with renewed fury. The Murloc ships, already battered and reeling, began to crumble under the onslaught. Explosions blossomed across their hulls as the antimatter beam sliced through their armor like a hot knife through butter. On the bridge of his flagship, Warlord Cray howled with rage as he watched his armada being torn apart. His claws gouged deep furrows into the arms of his command chair, his eyes blazing with a manic light. "Launch the bioweapon," he roared. "Let the humans choke on their own blood." A single Murloc ship, its hull pitted and scarred, broke away from the battle. It dove towards the surface of New Carthage, a gleaming cylinder clutched in its launch bay. The bioweapon, a twisted masterpiece of Murloc science, streaked towards the planet's atmosphere. It detonated in a sickly green flash, its deadly payload scattering across the wind. On the surface, the first victims began to fall. They clutched at their throats, their eyes bulging as the virus ravaged their bodies. Within minutes, the streets were littered with the dead and the dying, the air filled with the wails of the infected. In orbit, the human defenders watched in horror as the scope of the atrocity became clear. They were faced with an impossible choice: continue the fight against the Murlocs and their traitorous Daxamite allies, or break off to attempt a desperate rescue of the planet's population. Admiral Erickson closed his eyes, the weight of command bearing down on him like a physical burden. The fate of millions hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking. The aftermath: Admiral Erickson's jaw clenched as he stared at the tactical display. The situation on New Carthage was deteriorating by the second. The Murloc bioweapon was spreading like wildfire, and the death toll was mounting. He had to act fast. Helm, bring us about. We're splitting the fleet. I want a contingent of ships to head down to the surface now. We need boots on the ground to help with evacuation and containment. The bridge crew scrambled to carry out his orders. Erickson turned to his comms officer. Get me a line to the surface. I need to coordinate with the ground forces. On the planet below, chaos reigned. Civilians ran through the streets, screaming as the virus ravaged their bodies. Human soldiers and medics worked tirelessly to evacuate the infected and treat the wounded. They set up makeshift triage centers in the streets, desperately trying to stem the tide of death. Korvac and his Daxamite troops arrived on the scene, their armor still scorched from the mutiny against Sorton. They quickly joined forces with the human defenders, using their superior strength and technology to help with the evacuation efforts. We need to get these people to the safe zones, Korvac shouted over the din of screams and gunfire. Move, move, move. Together, the humans and Daxamites managed to save a significant portion of the population. They herded the survivors onto transport ships, which ferried them to orbiting quarantine facilities. But even as they worked, the virus continued to spread, claiming more lives with every passing minute. In a makeshift laboratory on the outskirts of the city, Dr. Eliza Novak and her team raced against time to develop a counteragent to the bioweapon. They had been working around the clock, analyzing samples of the virus and testing potential treatments. We're close, Novak said, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. I can feel it. We just need a little more time. Her assistant, a young man named Jace, shook his head. We don't have time, Doc. People are dying out there. Novak slammed her fist on the table. I know that, damn it, but if we rush this, we could make things.